In the hallowed halls of action cinema, where biceps were currency and one-liners were lethal weapons, one man dared to do the impossible. Sylvester Stallone, already carved into Mount Rushmore of icons through Rocky and Rambo, didn't just join the Expendables, he willed it into existence. He was its architect, its godfather, its undeniable creative force. Think of him as the ultimate action figure collector, but instead of keeping them in boxes, he put them on screen and gave them bigger guns. He built a sanctuary for a fading breed of larger-than-life hero, a place where the legends of the 80s and 90s could prove they weren't just relics. It was his vision, his kingdom, built on a foundation of pure, unadulterated muscle. And into this kingdom of established titans walked a new kind of warrior, a man who looked less like a comic book hero and more like your exceptionally dangerous accountant, Jason Statham. Statham wasn't trading on nostalgia, he was the current model. A former world-class diver for England's national team, he brought an athlete's discipline and a completely different energy. Where his co-stars were monuments of glorious theatrical brute force, Statham was a precision instrument of mayhem. As Lee Christmas, he wasn't just another member of the team, he was lightning in a bottle. A fusion of ruthless efficiency, deadpan humor that could drain the tension from any room, and a street-level credibility that resonated powerfully with a new generation of fans. His fighting style, a brutal cocktail of Wing Chun, kickboxing, and gritty brawling, was fast, fluid, and devastatingly practical. It was the difference between a glorious, sweeping broadsword and a stiletto dagger. Both lethal, but one was decidedly more modern. But a fascinating, almost Shakespearean dynamic began to unfold. With each sequel, Statham's star didn't just rise, it went supernova. His character's screen time expanded, his stunts became the centerpiece of the films, and his dry wit became the franchise's secret weapon. He wasn't just fitting in with the old guard, he was effortlessly upstaging them. The audience didn't just like him, they anointed him. The question began to whisper through the sound stages and studio lots. Was Stallone, the aging king, intentionally grooming a charismatic successor to carry his legacy? Or was he watching with growing unease and a clenched jaw, as a charismatic prince not only sharpened the swords, but started eyeing the throne itself in his own castle? This is the story of that precarious power shift, a tale of how the very success of an heir apparent can shatter the throne he was meant to inherit. The kingdom of the Expendables, built on unity, was about to face its most formidable enemy, a civil war. The clash of visions. But what happens when the blueprints for the kingdom itself are being questioned? This brewing tension soon revealed itself as a fundamental battle over the very soul of the Expendables. This wasn't just a petty squabble over who had the bigger knife. It was a clash of visions, a textbook Hollywood conflict between two completely opposing philosophies of what makes a movie. On one side stood Sylvester Stallone, the quintessential auteur. Now, in film school terms, an auteur, a French word meaning author, is a filmmaker, usually a director, whose personal influence and control are so profound that they are regarded as the primary creative force. The film is their baby, from conception to graduation. Think Stanley Kubrick, Alfred Hitchcock, or in the action realm, someone like John Woo. For Stallone, The Expendables was his masterpiece, his Sistine Chapel of explosions. He wasn't just the star, he was the writer, the director, the puppet master pulling every string. His approach was old school, hierarchical, and fiercely protective, a benevolent dictatorship, if you will. Every grunt of dialogue, every story beat where someone drove a car through a building was a reflection of his specific, hard-won action sensibilities forged in the 80s. It was a my way or the highway approach, and frankly, the highway was probably also rigged to explode. On the other side was Jason Statham, representing a newer, more collaborative and pragmatic school of thought. Having cut his teeth on the chaotic, improvisational, and almost documentary-style sets of Guy Ritchie in films like Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels and Snatch, Statham's perspective was built from the ground up. On a Ritchie set, if you had a better, funnier line, you said it. If a fight could be grittier, you made it so. It was a creative free-for-all that produced magic. So when he found himself on the highly structured, meticulously planned set of The Expendables, reports suggest a growing friction. Statham began to question the material. He pushed for Lee Christmas to have more depth, a more dynamic arc beyond just being the reliable knife guy. He reportedly voiced concerns over scripts and action sequences that felt repetitive, or dare we say, uninspired. This wasn't mere insubordination. It was a master craftsman looking at the architect's blueprint and saying, I see what you're going for, but I've got some notes that could make this wall a lot stronger, and maybe we could add a flamethrower. He believed he could help build a better, more modern product. The set became a tense negotiating table between the classic Auteur and the Modernizer. And as we'll see, when creative differences can't be resolved, the conversation quickly shifts from the artistic to something much more tangible and explosive: the language of money. The Paycheck War. The clash of philosophies on set was merely the opening skirmish. The true war for the soul of the Expendables would be fought not over scripts, but over spreadsheets. Welcome to the brutal economics of Hollywood, the Paycheck War. At the heart of the conflict was a fundamental industry principle, an actor's quote. A quote is an actor's going rate, the baseline salary they can command. It's a cold, hard calculation based almost entirely on one thing: proven box office draw. In the early days, the hierarchy was clear. Stallone was the legendary auteur and top-billed star, paid accordingly. Jason Statham entered at a much lower tier, but a seismic shift was occurring. While the Expendables was celebrating past glories, Jason Statham was building his future. The Transporter and Crank franchises solidified him as a bankable global lead. Then came the game changer, his scene-stealing role in Fast and Furious. Suddenly, Statham wasn't just a reliable action star, he was part of a global cinematic juggernaut. His quotes skyrocketed. So when he returned to the negotiating table for the Expendables 3, the old hierarchy was financially obsolete. Reports erupted of bitter negotiations. Statham, backed by his new box office data, rightly demanded parity with Stallone's salary. From a business standpoint, this was a logical power move, but in the court of Sly's kingdom, this was a direct challenge to the throne. The Godfather saw it as a betrayal. The actor saw it as a demand for what the free market deemed he was worth. This financial stalemate created a Cold War on set, where every interaction was now shadowed by the unspoken multi-million-dollar question. The on-set Cold War. With a multi-million-dollar contract dispute left to fester like an untreated wound, the set of The Expendables 3 underwent a chilling transformation. It morphed from a blockbuster playground into a silent, high-stakes battlefield where the only sounds were the quiet tension between takes and the deafening silence where camaraderie used to be. To understand the severity of this, you need to grasp the psychology of a film set. It's not just a workplace, it's a delicate, high-pressure ecosystem that operates like a solar system, with the lead actors as its suns. Their gravitational pull dictates the climate for everyone, from the supporting cast right down to the interns fetching coffee. When those two central stars are locked in a standoff, the entire system fractures. The atmosphere becomes charged with a palpable anxiety that you could practically taste, like ozone before a storm. Crew members, the true veterans of film sets, are experts at reading this energy. They know when to become invisible, when to speak in hushed tones. On Expendables 3, they were walking on eggshells, and those eggshells were balanced on a tightrope stretched over a pit of legal documents and wounded pride. The reports that trickled out painted a picture of two parallel universes operating on the same soundstage. Stallone and Statham maintained a frosty, strictly professional distance. They would arrive, deliver their lines with technical precision, and hit their marks with the cold efficiency of a metronome. But the magic, the spontaneous laughter between takes, the shared stories over craft services, the easy, muscular banter that made the first film so infectious had completely evaporated. It was like watching two elite surgeons perform an operation, perfectly competent, but with zero soul. This chilling dynamic became impossible to hide when the cast was forced to play nice on the global promotional tour. This is where the body language experts would have had a field day. Watch the old interviews closely. They rarely, if ever, shared a frame. The publicists had clearly choreographed a delicate dance to keep them separated. On the rare occasions they were forced together, the visual cues were screaming. They would stand angled away from each other, creating a literal human barrier. Their eye contact was minimal and fleeting, often looking at the interviewer as an intermediary rather than at each other. Statham's arms would be crossed, a classic sign of defensiveness, while Stallone would adopt a more rigid, puffed-up posture. the body language of a king who refuses to acknowledge the challenger in his court. These weren't the signals of a united family, as the franchise's marketing so loudly proclaimed. This was a partnership in name only, a corporate merger that everyone knew was on the verge of a hostile takeover. And this top-level friction was a toxin that inevitably trickled down. The rest of the all-star ensemble, icons in their own right, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Dolph Lundgren, and Jet Li, found themselves in a deeply uncomfortable and politically charged position. It was Hollywood's version of choosing sides in a divorce. Do you align with the founding godfather, the man who gave you this platform? Or do you tacitly side with the rising, pragmatic star who represented the modern era and maybe shared your own unspoken frustrations? This division creates invisible factions in the lunch tent, silences the easy, improvisational collaboration that breeds truly great ensemble work, and forces every actor to second-guess their interactions. The glorious, unscripted magic of the first film was the genuine electric chemistry of legends rediscovering their youth together. The third film was plagued by an invisible, soundproof wall dividing its two biggest stars. And that dissonance didn't just linger in the air. It seeped directly into the final celluloid, making the on-screen Brotherhood feel exactly like what it was, a contractual obligation. The fallout in Franchise Implosion. Every conflict has its casualties, and the Statham-Stallone Cold War ultimately claimed the franchise itself. The fallout was swift, decisive, and served as a masterclass in what happens when real-world drama torpedoes a billion-dollar brand. In Expendables 3, the consequences were written directly into the script. Jason Statham's Lee Christmas, once the vibrant, scene-stealing heir apparent, was noticeably and deliberately sidelined. His screen time shrunk. His character arc was flattened into a generic knife guy caricature, and his signature wit was largely muted. This wasn't subtle, it was a narrative demotion, a clear punishment for the real-world power struggle. It's the cinematic equivalent of being sent to the principal's office, if the principal was Sylvester Stallone and the office was a boring subplot. But the damage went far deeper than one character's role. The film itself was met with scathing criticism for being bloated, tonally schizophrenic, wavering between cartoonish violence and forced seriousness, and for lacking the raw, gritty charm of the original. This brings us to a crucial Hollywood concept: franchise fatigue. This isn't just audiences getting bored, it's a specific condition where a series loses its cultural momentum due to repetitive storytelling and diminishing returns. But what truly accelerates this fatigue, more than any stale plot, is internal drama. Audiences are incredibly perceptive. They don't just watch a movie, they feel the energy behind it. When the off-screen conflict, the cold stares on the press tour, the reports of bitter arguments, becomes more compelling than the on-screen story of brotherhood and loyalty, the illusion shatters completely. The magic is gone. The Expendables 3 didn't just underperform at the box office, it bombed, killing the momentum for the planned fourth installment indefinitely. The ultimate proof of the rift's permanence, however, is written in the subsequent career trajectories of our two warring titans. Statham, the spurned heir, didn't just find another job. He found a new, more lucrative, and globally dominant family in the Fast and Furious universe, where he was welcomed as a top-tier star and finally paid his true worth. Stallone, meanwhile, gracefully returned to curating his own legendary status, reviving Rambo for one last stand and passing the torch of Rocky to Michael B. Jordan in the Creed series. The kingdom of the Expendables was left abandoned, a ghost town built on the ironic foundation of brotherhood, now serving as a stark monument to the very real, very human discord that tore it apart. The legacy of a broken brotherhood. So what is the final verdict on the war that shattered the Expendables? After examining the evidence, the truth is not simple, but layered. This was a perfect storm of conflicts, each one escalating the next until the entire collaboration collapsed under its own weight. It began fundamentally as a creative difference, the classic, almost inevitable struggle between a visionary auteur, fiercely protective of his creation, and a modern star, confident in his own instincts and pushing for evolution. It then escalated into a brutal business dispute, a cold, hard negotiation where Statham's skyrocketing market value, proven by the Fast and Furious juggernaut, collided head-on with Stallone's established kingdom and its rigid financial hierarchy. And finally, it curdled into the most destructive force in Hollywood, a deeply personal clash of egos. It became about legacy versus ascent, about who rightfully owned the soul of a world built on the idea of brotherhood. The tragic irony here is almost Shakespearean. The Expendables was conceived as a living monument to action hero camaraderie, a final glorious stand for a brotherhood of legends. Yet it was ultimately fractured by the very human, very real failure of that same brotherhood between its two most important pillars. It stands now as a permanent testament to a simple, brutal truth in Tinseltown. Passing the torch is never as easy as lighting it. The king must be willing to hand it over, and the prince must be patient. When that delicate dance fails, the price of succession is often the kingdom itself. The kingdom may be silent, but the legends have moved on, their legacies forever intertwined by this untold war. The fallout is complete.